At some point, I did some readings from Goddard's Buddhist Bible. Goddard was the editor of that volume, which was one of the earliest books that I got exposed to help me learn about Buddhism, particularly about the Buddhist scriptures. While in this day and age, some of Goddard's translations may not be judged to be the best or the most literal, he really had kind of a passionate love for Buddhism, and I was certainly appreciative of the fact that these texts were available to me in English at a time when there were very few books that contained English translations of Buddhist sutras. In any case, this Buddhist Bible, I did some recitation, and one fellow who watched the video, one of the videos, he said, "The Four Noble Truths don't apply in the realm of emptiness? So if I can live with emptiness, I will see things clearer?" He said, "I am sorry. If I am not getting it, I will get it somehow." So Goddard, he shared, many of the teachings of the early form of Buddhism, the Theravada school, and again gave direct quotes, if you will, or translations from the early scriptures, but then goes on to the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra and parts of the Lankavatara Sutra. So this particular listener understandably was confused when he first read about the importance of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and then got exposed to the concept of Sunyata, or emptiness, in the Diamond Sutra. Well, here's what I said. I said, the way I look at it is that the Four Noble Truths are a preliminary training. And of course, this is not my idea. This is in essence what the Buddha, I believe, is teaching in the Lotus Sutra when he's speaking to the assembly of Shravakas. He's saying that, that teaching that I gave at that time, it was a provisional teaching. It was an expedient means to help you along the path, because that is the teaching that you were capable of relating to at that time. So again, I said, the way I look at it is that the Four Noble Truths are a preliminary training and a very valuable resource for understanding and practice. And I would stand by this very strongly. In other words, that this whole idea that people should jump right into the Mahayana is not necessarily, in my opinion, the best way to go, particularly if somebody is early in their exposure to Buddhism, because the truth of dukkha, or suffering, the truth of the fact that we have the ability to transcend suffering through trying to address the problem of craving that is the source of the suffering, and the wonderful precepts and kinds of life guidance that exists in the Eightfold Path is just extraordinary. And again, as I say here, a very valuable resource for understanding and practice. Then I went on to say, but then at some point, one may get a glimpse of a deeper perspective, one in which an insight into emptiness occurs. And I put emptiness in quotes. And those of you that have listened to a number of my videos know that my way of thinking about emptiness is that it means that every person, every entity, everything is empty of its own totally independent self-existence. So in this sense, emptiness does not mean nihilism, or that there's nothing there. There clearly is something here. Here I am spouting off these words in front of this camera. And, so there is something, but it's not what I generally think that it is in the context of my illusory thinking, where I view myself as a separate person named John. That just is not the way it is in a fundamental sense. And I made the point, I said, that insight into emptiness cannot be put into words. And that's so important. Inconceivable. No concept can articulate the nature of fundamental reality. No words or concepts, and this is what we hear over and over in scriptures like the Lankavatara Sutra. So that insight cannot be put into words. It can only be suggested by language. So it's not that we shouldn't use words to try to, point that finger toward the moon. We just need not confuse the finger for the moon. That, we are thinking beings. Again, we the nature of our mind is such that we create concepts. And so it's natural as we communicate with fellow beings, fellow Homo sapiens, fellow humans, that we would utilize this gift that we have of language in order to try to express something, even though that something is ultimately inexpressible with this limited form of communication that we have, given our level of evolution and development as a species. So after I indicate that this truth, this emptiness, can only be suggested by language, I say, but many feel, and I would be included in this number, many feel that words such as those in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, like the Heart and Diamond Sutras, come about as close as is possible. This is what's amazing to me and what blows my mind. And I was just speaking to a Dharma friend in recent weeks who, when he was exposed to the Diamond Sutra, it just is amazing the way, if you immerse yourself in that particular scripture or in any one of the Prajnaparamita or wisdom sutras, how they, even though they can be very repetitive, like the one in 8,000 lines that I'm reciting now, that they can use language to point to something beyond language, and something that is inconceivable. But just to make a side note here, the 8,000 line Prajnaparamita Sutra also says that don't get hung up on emptiness. In other words, the Bodhisattva, for example, who has the insight into emptiness, or Sunyata, that's all well and good. But if he or she does not also have a sense of pity and compassion for sentient beings who are suffering, and the willingness to apply this insight and knowledge into the establishment of skillful means or expedient methods to help people with that suffering, well, then, as it says in the sutra, they're not a bodhisattva at the level of irreversibility. You know, they haven't attained that key stage that's closer to Buddhahood, which is the combination of wisdom and compassion. So, again, I said that many feel that words such as those in the Prajnaparamita Sutras come about as close as possible to expressing this inexpressible. Some who tout this so-called non-dual perspective would tell you that there is nothing to get, and I put get in quotes. And so here we have the way of describing this consciousness in a sense. It's a non-dual consciousness. It's an insight that transcends our ordinary thinking mind in terms of its tendency, its inherent design, really, to analyze in terms of breaking things down into this versus that. So if a person has this non-dual perspective, and there are many YouTube videos of people who have had this experience, and many of them will tell you there's nothing to get. The whole idea of attainment is itself an expedient means. They may or may not phrase it in those terms, but in effect they say that that the notion of attainment and striving toward attainment is in itself a more limited form of experience than would be associated with this non-dual consciousness. Now, what I told this guy, I said I would put it this way. I said, don't worry, my friend, just read and savor. So for what that's worth, that was my advice to him. And my advice to him at that point was related to the fact that he was clearly struggling, having self-doubts, calling his own sort of abilities into question because of not being able to, quote, get this, concept of emptiness. So, again, my message to him and to anybody listening to this, this rambling that I'm doing here in this video, that has these kinds of questions in their own mind, I say, don't worry, just read and savor. Namo Mita Boots. Namo Mita Boots. Namo Mita Boots.